Starting from last year, college football finally changed its playoff format. For a while, from 2014 to last year, it has been four teams that make the playoffs, and it has to be the top four teams in college football altogether. They have recently brought it up to 12 teams, and we saw a 12-team format last year, with Notre Dame losing to Ohio State in the national championship, and the Buckeyes became national champions, being the only team to do it in two different formats. They were the first to win when it was four teams, and they were the first to win when there were 12 teams, so congratulations to the Buckeyes. With my top 25 rankings out now, it is time for you guys to see my prediction on who I think is going to be making the 2025 through 26 college football playoffs, the 12-team format. It is going to be fun and exciting, and I honestly was having a lot of fun creating the artwork, constructing this video and even editing it. This is going to be extremely entertaining to watch. So this is one of my favorite videos so far of season 3, so I hope you guys are ready. My name is Aaron, this is the Game Day Hour, and this is episode 16, the Game Day Hour's college football playoff prediction. I hope you guys enjoy. Before we get into today's video, I got to explain to you the difference between last year's format and this year's because there have been some minor tweaks to how the format is set up. So last year, you had 4 bye-week teams. So it's the top 4, and then you had the other 8 playing it out in the first round. The home team was at their own stadium, so you had sites like South Bend, College Park. So you had sites like South Bend, University Park, Columbus, and Austin being hosts. We are seeing a new format. Let me just kind of explain. The top 4 teams were conference champions or the best non-power 4 team out, but they weren't necessarily the best teams in the rankings. For example, Oregon was the number 1 team. They were undefeated. They won the Big Ten championship, so they obviously got the number 1 spot. Georgia suffered a few losses throughout the year. They ended up winning the SEC. They got the number 2 seed despite the fact that they were number 4 or number 3 in the actual ranking. Then you had the biggest concern. Boise State was just barely top 10, and they got the number 3 seed because they were the 3rd highest conference champ or non-power 4 school out there. So they got the number 3 seed, but they were way ahead of their national ranking. Same deal with Arizona State, who got a bye at the number 4 spot. They were like number 12, number 13 in the rankings, but they ended up having the number 4 spot, which is just kind of wild. And then Clemson, the ACC champion, had to be the number 12 team because there has to be a 5th spot for one of those teams, and they would automatically get the lower spot or wherever they were in the rankings. At the time, Clemson was number 16, so they ended up getting the lowest seed possible. And then the other 7 teams just based on ranking after that. Well, you're no longer going to get conference champions taking up the bye week. It is the best 4 teams no matter what record. So you can have 2 conference champions and 2 of the best teams by record in the bye weeks, and then you base it off of that. You still get your 4 conference champions and the best non-power 4 school out there in the playoffs, but they're not guaranteed a bye, and that is a big difference because what we ended up seeing last year is all 4 of those bye week teams lost. Now, 2 of those were as followed with the rankings: Boise State and Arizona State. Georgia lost their quarterback, that was obvious, and Oregon just got pummeled by Ohio State, that was a tough bracket, by the way, for Oregon. Number 8 versus number 9, tough competition either way. 4 best in the rankings, they automatically get byes. And then the rest, you will have some conference champions, the non-power 4 school, and then whoever else is ranked pretty high in that regards. This should balance it out and actually make it more fair to the teams who are actually better to get byes. And we'll see if that works out for this format, but it is a little experimental, so I understand if it is still confusing, but you'll see as we look through the rankings. But without further ado, it's time to get into the portal and see who I have making the college football playoffs for 2025. Let's get into this. So here is the portal. You have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which number 1, the 8 and 9 bracket, that side is the top left. The top right is the number 2 team with 10 versus 7. The bottom right is the number 3 team, 6 versus 11, and then the bottom left would be the number 4 team, 5 versus 12. Looking at this format, this is going to be a very exciting playoff experiment. Looking at this format, it's going to be a very great experience for this year's college football playoffs. And we're just going to get into who I think is going to be making it in. We're going to go from 12 to 1, and each team is going to get their special moment. And we're also going to see these teams come in one by one, so pay close attention. These are going to be extremely fun to make. Who is the number 12 team? Let's take a look. It is the Memphis Tigers. Now, again, there has to be a non-Power 4 team in the college football playoffs. So at that point, it's based on who is the highest ranked non-Power 4 team. Last year, it was Boise State. They were undefeated except for a loss to Oregon, but they were the highest ranked team. Army and Memphis and UNLV were other close ones, but Boise State led by far, so they got the nod into the playoffs. This is an interesting one because I don't think Army is going to do what they did last year. I don't think they're going to stay undefeated for a very long time and then lose to Notre Dame. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think Army is going to struggle a little bit more this year. Boise is now without their number 1 running back. He's off to the NFL, so I think they're going to take a dip in production. And then UNLV, I just don't see UNLV as a consistent team up there in the rankings. But there are a few consistent teams that I like overall. One of those teams is Memphis. Now, as somebody who has attended the University of North Texas, I've gotten to see a fair amount of Memphis games. And overall, I think that Memphis is the toughest opponent in the AAC. You have teams like Tulane that are also up there, but Memphis is really tough. They're very consistent. They're generally a top-tier non-Power 4 team. So I like my chances seeing Memphis in the playoffs. I do think that Boise still has a chance to make it. I just think that they're going to suffer a little more losses, and Memphis is going to be very consistent this year. Because of that, the Tigers of Memphis sneak in number 12 seed in the playoffs, representing all the group of 5 teams. We have number 12. Now let's see who sits at the number 11 spot. Who do we have? It is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, if you remember, Alabama missed out on the playoffs, being the number 13 spot. They ended up losing to SMU in the vote by the committee, so they got pushed out and ended up losing to Michigan in their bowl game last year. This is the most disappointing Alabama team I've ever seen. Ever since I started watching football, Saban was the head coach of Alabama, and he's always held Alabama to a very high standard, always a contender in a very high manner. Alabama lost 4 games last year. They got blown out by Oklahoma. They lost to Vanderbilt. They lost to Michigan. It was bad. They did not have a great year. They did have some impressive wins, like Georgia, but overall, this team was just very sorry, very, very bad. And Alabama, I think that they're going to do a lot better this year. I kind of have Alabama losing 2 games, but ultimately missing out on the SEC championship, but they're going to be ranked highly enough for them to sneak into the playoffs, which is why I have them right here. But DeBoer, he got to get something going, because if Alabama ends up struggling again, there's going to be a hot seat in Alabama, something we have not seen in a very long time. So I think Alabama breaks through. I do think that they do catch the eye of the College Football Committee, but only at the number 11 spot. Now that number 12 and number 11 are out of the way, let's take a step upwards. Let's look at the number 10 spot. Who is number 10 in this playoff prediction? It is the Clemson Tigers. I had a lot of trouble with this pick because Clemson has not looked like its gold standard day of age ever since Trevor Lawrence has left. But Clemson has had its moments of success, and they did win the ACC last year over SMU, which is pretty impressive. Good thing about Clemson is they are retaining Cade Klubnik and some pieces to that offense, so Clemson should be a lot better this year. But we're going to find out who this team is immediately. They are hosting LSU to start off the year. I think that what happens to Clemson is they compete in the ACC championship, ended up losing the ACC championship, and sit at the number 10 spot, but they are pretty high up on the list, so they don't drop pretty bad. Clemson, I believe, is going to remain in the playoffs at number 10, having to be in the number 2 bracket. So Clemson, congratulations. I think you guys go in for a second year in a row. So far, Memphis, Alabama, and Clemson are on the road, but who is going to be the number 9 team who is also on the road in what was last year's toughest part of the bracket? Who's number 9? It is the Texas Longhorns, which is kind of a surprise. They are predicted to win the SEC championship, but the issue with Texas is look at the schedule. They have a gauntlet ahead of them, and it's going to be a very tough route to the playoffs. I do think that Texas does make the SEC championship game, but they do suffer losses throughout the year. I think they finished off 11-2, losing the SEC championship game, but being rated higher than someone like Alabama. And their loss is also going to hurt because there's another SEC team that is not a conference champion that will be above them, and you'll find out who that is here in a few moments. But Texas, it's really hard for me to put them this low. Arch Manning, I think, is going to be an incredible quarterback, but the Longhorns, you kind of get the draw of the card. They have to go to Columbus. They have to go to Athens this year. It's not an easy schedule for the Longhorns, but we'll find out what type of team Texas is when they play Ohio State week 1 in the Horseshoe. Now we have all the away teams settled. It's time to take a look at where they are heading for their college football playoff matchup. Who is playing Texas in the 9 versus 8 spot? Who's number 8? We have the Ohio State Buckeyes, the team who won the national championship last year, who was also the number 8 seed in the playoffs last year. They beat Tennessee. They played Oregon, beat them pretty bad. They also beat Texas in the semifinals and then beat Notre Dame in the national championship. Ohio State is a very tough team overall. But the problem with the Buckeyes is that they lost a lot of pieces. They did retain their superstar wide receiver in Jeremiah Smith, but overall, Ohio State lost its quarterback, lost both its running backs. It is in a new identity, and if they don't figure something out early on, a tough loss to Texas early on would be an issue for the Buckeyes, and they also have tough competition. Of course, they have to play Penn State this year, who is another high competitor overall. And Ohio State, they haven't beaten Michigan in 4 years. There's a lot of things that can go wrong for the Buckeyes, but I do think that the Buckeyes will finish in the playoffs. And being number 8, that's still a favorable spot for them. I mean, they proved it last year. But yeah, the first playoff game, number 9 Texas versus number 8 Ohio State in the Horseshoe in Columbus, playing for the third time against each other and over the span of a year, which is just kind of crazy to think about. But yes, the Buckeyes are number 8. Now it's time to take a look at where Clemson is going in week 1 of the playoffs. Who is number 7? It is the Miami Hurricanes. Now, I have Miami winning the ACC championship game over Clemson, which means that the teams would play against each other back-to-back weeks, basically, even though it's a couple weeks apart. I do think that Miami is the better team, has the better quarterback in Carson Beck. Overall, Miami is looking for vengeance. They got knocked out in the last week of the regular season, which hurt their chances not playing in the ACC championship game and being one of the first 2 out in the playoffs. Miami would then go on to lose to Iowa State in their bowl game. What is to make of Miami this year? Well, they have a tough schedule to start off with. They play Notre Dame. They're hosting them, but they're playing Notre Dame to begin off. And I think that that's where one of their first losses is going to come. But overall, I do think that they are going to be really good in ACC play, and then they'll beat Clemson, and number 7 will be the spot for them. I don't know if they're going to struggle with certain games they ought to win like they did last year, but if they play their cards correctly, this should be the ACC championship team. But this is also the example where they're not given a bye despite the fact that they win their conference. And this is an example of that. But yes, I have Miami finishing at number 7 in the number 2 bracket overall, playing Clemson in Miami. Now, it's time to see where are the Crimson Tide going in their first playoff bout. Who is the number 6 spot? It is Brigham Young University. This is probably the most shocking part. This is the Big 12 champions who I think they're going to win the Big 12 overall. BYU is a very consistent team, doesn't have a terribly tough schedule, so they should theoretically make it pretty far, and maybe even having a potential undefeated season, but they're not going to be ranked really big because, come on, BYU in the Big 12 is not going to get as much respect as the other 3 Power 4 conferences. So they'll make it pretty high with an undefeated record, but will not be able to gain that early bye. And because of that, BYU sits at number 6, looking to host the Crimson Tide. On paper, this matchup easily favors Alabama, but you also have to remember that this is happening in December, and this game is happening in Provo, Utah, which is frigid about this time. So The thing that BYU has to their advantage is the weather. A warm weather school like Alabama will have a tough time playing in Provo, and hey, you might even see an upset which would favor BYU. But that is the 11 through 6 spot, Alabama versus BYU in Provo, Utah. Now, Memphis has been waiting for a while to see where they're going to be going. So, who is the number 5 seed playing Memphis in the first round? It is the LSU Tigers. LSU is a team that has the talent and even has some Heisman candidates to be performing this year for LSU. I do see LSU suffering one loss this year, and I do believe that they will miss out on the SEC championship game. I think Texas will end up losing, dropping below LSU, and because of that, LSU sits at number 5, not even needing to play in their conference championship game to have a good spot. LSU, I think, is going to be a very tough team. Obviously, they have some tough competition. They have to go to Clemson. They have to go to Alabama this year. So they do have some tough foes coming in. But LSU, I mean, Brian Kelly's on the hot seat. He kind of needs a season like this. I do believe that LSU is going to perform very well, just not well enough to make a first-round bye. But with all of that said, with everything we've discussed, those are the first round of the playoffs, and Memphis is going to Baton Rouge to play LSU as the final matchup. So with all that said, the host cities would be Columbus, Ohio, Miami, Florida, Provo, Utah, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A very, very large and separated spots. I mean, they all present their own challenges overall. But now it's time to see who got a first round bye, and we are going to be starting at number 4. It is the Oregon Ducks. Oregon last year finished as the number 1 team, got blown out by Ohio State in the semis. Despite the fact that Oregon lost its quarterback Dylan Gabriel, they still have a very tough team, very tough recruiting. I think Oregon, the fact that they don't have much tough competition except for Penn State early on, I think Oregon is going to be able to smoothly ride into the playoffs overall, get a nod over LSU, and be able to host, not at their own city, but most likely be playing in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. So I do believe that Oregon has favorability, especially the fact that they went undefeated last year in regular season play. And I think that Oregon has a chance to do it again. I would say that the reason why I have Oregon at number 4 is the team at number 1. They would end up losing to that team early on in the season. But yeah, the Ducks control the number 4 spot and would play the winner between Memphis and LSU. Now, with that said, who is going to be going against either Alabama or BYU as the number 3 team? It is the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, a lot of people think that Georgia is actually going to take a step down because you saw the quarterback play against Notre Dame. It was not fantastic. It was not spectacular. It was good against Texas, bad against the Irish. But overall, Georgia's defense is the reason why they continue to be a favorite in the SEC, and I believe that overall, if you're going to Athens, you're going to have tough competition no matter what. Georgia, I believe, sits at number 3 spot, the SEC champions overall. I do think they beat Texas in the SEC championship game again, but with some losses early on in the year, they would sit as high as the number 3 spot, being able to play either Alabama or BYU, which I think they would handle with ease either way. So Georgia, a very favorable spot in this playoffs at number 3. Now, Clemson and Miami, both tough competition. Who would they play if the one of them ended up moving on to the second round? Who is the number 2 team on this list? It is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame played last year in the championship game against Ohio State. They were trailing big. At one point, it looked like they were making a comeback, got as close as to 8 points, but then ended up losing to Ohio State. Notre Dame's only loss last year before that was to NIU, a very embarrassing loss, but Notre Dame would go on to play very good football after that. And then throughout the playoffs, they rolled through Indiana, they took care of Georgia, and in a nail-biter, they beat Penn State. And Notre Dame last year looked like a for-real contender overall. The Irish are tough. Now, they do have a tough opening this year, going to Miami, and then 2 weeks later, they'll be hosting Texas A&M, even having Arkansas and Boise State on their schedule as well. This is going to be a very tough year for Notre Dame, but they did do well recruiting and got to keep Jeremiah Love, their number 1 running back, who is the number 1 running back going into this year for college football. There's a lot to be excited for. Notre Dame doesn't have to play a conference championship game. I have Notre Dame as one of 3 teams this year going undefeated in regular season play, the other being BYU and number 1, which you'll see here in just a second. But Notre Dame will be number 2, and because they don't have a conference championship, they will not get to number 1. It is what it is, but overall, Notre Dame would host either Clemson or Miami in one of the New Year's 6 bowl games. But now, who sits as the number 1 team in this ranking? Let's see who it is. It is Penn State. This is a little bit of a shocking one, but a lot of people have Penn State as a playoff favorite, and so do I. I think Penn State is going to have some significant wins this year over Oregon and Ohio State. They will go undefeated, and they will end up winning the Big Ten championship, which they will be the number 1 team hosting either Texas or Ohio State, which is not a very favorable spot to be in. But Penn State, they lost some major pieces like Abdul and Tyler Warren, but they managed to retain some offensive weapons, especially the quarterback. I think that Penn State will have a new resurgence, and they will play a lot better this year. They should, theoretically. I mean, they were really good last year, lost to Notre Dame in the final minutes, but Penn State is set for a very entertaining college football year. So I can't wait to see how good they are. I believe they'll finish number 1 and host either Texas or Ohio State in this ranking. And this is the entire ranking. 1, 2, 3, 4, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Oregon, and then the hosts 5, 6, 7, 8, LSU, BYU, Miami, and Ohio State. And then the road teams, number 9, Texas, number 10, Clemson, number 11, Alabama, and number 12, Memphis. This is the entire playoff picture, and I want to know what you guys think about this picture overall. And that'll do it for today's episode. I thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. Again, this was a very fun one to make overall, and I'm glad that you guys got to see it. If you enjoyed what you saw, leave a like, comment down below. Let's try to reach 10 likes on this episode. I haven't had a video that has reached that high, or at least not in a while. So I would love to see this get up to double-digit likes. Hopefully, I would love for this to be my number 1 viewed video, but we'll see how that goes. If you haven't already, please subscribe, as I'm trying to get closer to 200 subscribers and continue to move upwards in this industry and in football in general, as far as podcasts go. So I thank you guys so much for the support on many of the shorts that I've had as of recent weeks, and the episodes have just been blowing up. I've had many episodes that have reached really high, so I thank you guys so much for watching and enjoying these videos. And again, find this video very interesting, leave a like, comment down below, subscribe, and go follow me on all my social medias. I'm trying to post there a lot more with shorts. But thank you guys. You guys have a great day. Take care, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.